Italian livestock. So thank you, Andrea.
Okay, thank you. Well, to start with, Hobi-like pestiviruses, also known as BVDV type 3, pestivirus H, or atypical bovine pestiviruses, have been sporadically reported from natural infections in cattle in Brazil, some countries of Asia, and some countries of Europe, like Italy. And although these viruses seem to be endemic in Brazilian bovines and water buffaloes, they have not been studied in the other countries of South America, where BVDV type 1 and type 2 circulates everywhere. On the other hand, fetal bovine serum is an important calcified product obtained in the slaughterhouses, frequently used in the biotechnology industry to supplement cell cultures within the processes of vaccines, recombinant proteins, biotherapeutics, etc. But the use of fetal bovine serum sometimes carries viral contaminations which affect the quality of the product and cells, and some of the most important viral agents found in fetal bovine serum are pestiviruses. And despite the viral infectivity can be avoided through gamma irradiation, several companies offer non-irradiated serum. The whole work was to determine the Hobi circulation in Argentina, and for that purpose, we worked with two strategies. The first was to perform comparative serology for BVDV and Hobi from buffalo cattle close to Brazil, and the second one, that is the one I'm going to deepen then, is the analysis of fetal bovine serum originated in Buenos Aires, which is the region in green. The first work, was performed in 3 provinces which are close to Brazil. They are Formosa, Corrientes, and Chaco. We sampled 12 farms. In total, there were 130 non-vaccinated buffaloes. I mean, they have never received vaccines against the respiratory or the reproductive complexes, so we can assume that the antibodies found there were product of natural infections and not derived by vaccines. So we determined the neutralizing antibodies against BVDV 1A, 1B, BVDV 2, and Hobi by virus neutralization. And we could see that 32% of the water buffaloes contain antibodies against any of the strains evaluated, and 53% of these seropositive animals contained significantly higher levels of neutralizing antibodies against Hobi than against BVDV 1 or 2. So that was for us the first evidence of Hobi circulation in water buffaloes in Argentina. Now, going to the second strategy, that was about the analysis of fetal bovine serum originated in Buenos Aires. To do this, we used an experimental design described by Bauerman and Riedbad in 1214. They, in that case, wanted to find traces of Hobi in fetal bovine serum originated in the United States, and in our case, the samples were from Buenos Aires province. So the first aim was to evaluate the presence of traces of Hobi viruses in local fetal bovine serum samples, and the second objective was to determine which BVDV genotype prevails in Buenos Aires region. Buenos Aires is not so close to Brazil, but it's the main cattle population area of the country, and that's because it's an important area to study. Regarding the material and methods, we work with 112 semi-elaborated fetal bovine serum samples that were obtained prior to the irradiation stage belonging to a national company, which is Internegocios, that commercializes blood products and works with slaughterhouses located in Buenos Aires province. After the RNA extraction, 2 different PCRs were carried out to detect the 5 untranslated regions of the genome of pestiviruses. Firstly, you work with the PAM-PESTI Vilsec primers, but Bauerman reported that these primers are not able to amplify some of the Hobi strains, so we work with another pair of primers described by Bauerman and Riedbad, which are the N2R5, that specifically amplifies the 5 untranslated regions of the Hobi viruses. So the positive samples were sequenced, and we performed the phylogenetic analysis by the Kimura and neighbor joining methods. And then the Hobi positive samples were subjected to passages in MDVK cells in order to isolate the viruses. And lastly, guinea pigs were vaccinated with oily formulations containing the isolated Hobi viruses to violate their immunogenicity. Then the animal's neutralizing antibody profile against pestiviruses was determined by cross-virus neutralization assays. Now, going to the results, we could see that 63% of the samples were negative for both PCRs. I mean, they didn't contain Hobi or VDV. 37% were positive to VDV by using the Vilsec pan-pesti primers, and the other 4% of the samples were positive to Hobi. And now, focusing on the VDV positive samples, the phylogenetic analysis showed that 81% of the samples were from VVDV1B genotype, 5% belonged to VVDV type 2, and 14% to VVDV1A. This result of the high frequency of VVDV1B did not surprise us, because 4 years ago we have published that this was the most prevalent genotype in Argentina, VVDV1B. Now, regarding the samples positive to the Hobi primers, these four, we asked the provider to give us irradiated and non-irradiated samples of these four samples. We performed the passages in MDVK, and we tried to perform the virus isolation with immunofluorescence, because they were all non-cytopathic. And we could see that the irradiation process was effective to inactivate the viruses, because the irradiated samples were negative for the virus isolation, while the non-irradiated samples were positive. So we kept on going with the non-irradiated samples. After the passages in MDVK, we could vaccinate guinea pigs, 4 guinea pigs, and then we used another one that was vaccinated with the Italian the Caro strain. It's a reference cytopathic strain. And, well, at 60 days post inoculation, we obtained the sera, and we performed the comparative serology with cytopathic reference strains of VDV1A, 1B2, and the Hobi, the Caro reference strain. And we could see that all the animals developed neutralizing antibody titers against the Hobi strain, while the titers against the other VVDV strains were much lower in all the cases. As conclusions, we can say that Hobi-like virus RNA was detected in 4 non-irradiated fetal bovine serum samples, which indicates that the virus is circulating in bovine herds in Buenos Aires. Then the high percentage of VVDV1B genotype strains found in this work is in agreement with a previous study, which reported the high frequency of this genotype in Argentina. Then the strategy of viral RNA recovery from batches of fetal bovine serum and genotyping may give an approximation to the variety of genotypes that circulate in the region of origin. The isolated guinea pigs, the isolated Hobi viruses evoked a specific antibody response in the guinea pigs. And lastly, this work reinforces the importance of the gamma irradiation process in the fetal bovine serum lots to avoid contamination with endemic or emerging pestiviruses. And I would like to finish with a really nice phrase that was written by the distinguished authors Schweitzer and Peter Hans, who said that it's likely that there are more scientists who work with pestiviruses than scientists who know that they work with pestiviruses. Thank you for your attention.